The Mental Loss. Understanding the Way the Mind Works by Rohn. The Mental Loss. This video is a short introduction to what I call the mental loss. The mental laws describe the way the mind works. This information can also be called the science of mind because it really is a science, as impersonal as the law of gravity and other physical laws. In this video, I attempt to map out the mental laws and the way the mind works as simply and as concisely as possible. I first wrote about the mental laws in response to readers' questions after the success of my books The Road to Power/Fast Food for the Soul. So many people were obviously surprised that the simple focus techniques I described in the books were so effective when it came to changing the course of their lives. How could it be? How could these simple focus tools be so effective? To answer this important question, I began writing about the mental laws in 2000. In a book I called Mental Technology/Software for Your Hardware, where I outlined for the first time the basic mental laws that govern the way our minds work. This video is a revised and updated version of my basic discovery of the mental laws. Why is this information important? This information is so important because without this understanding, we can easily become victims of our minds instead of the masters, as the questions from so many of my readers demonstrated to me. But the good news is that when we become aware of the simple, impersonal mechanisms that are governing our minds, we can then begin to use these impersonal forces constructively in our lives. In other words, I came to see that when we become aware of the laws governing these mechanisms, we can learn to harness this power for our own benefit, just as we need to understand the laws of physical phenomena, for example, the laws governing electricity, to use these forces constructively. I also discovered that once you understand the mental laws and the way the mind works, you understand why you experience life the way you do. And when this happens, you will also see what you can realistically change in your life and what you cannot change. Plus, you will also better understand the difference between reality, what is actually happening right now, and your thinking, and this discovery will lead you to an ever-deepening understanding of who/what you really are. In short, the information in this video can totally transform your life. So with this in mind, let's look briefly at the concept of law before we dive into this new, updated presentation of the mental laws. What is a mental law? What is a law? A law is an unchanging principle that describes the way phenomena operate. There are laws which describe the way physical phenomena operate, and there are laws which describe the way mental phenomena operate. Whether a law is describing physical or mental phenomena, a law is always a description of an impersonal sequence of events, which is not dependent on the person or people involved in that sequence of events. In addition, laws can be observed and confirmed by anyone. The law of gravity is a good example of a physical law. As you know, the law of gravity is impersonal and it is always operating. Because of this law, if you jump off a building, you will immediately fall to the ground. There are no exceptions to this law. It doesn't matter who you are or how much money you have in the bank or how famous you are, because the law is impersonal and operates regardless of the situation, time of year, or the people involved. There are no exceptions to the law. Another important thing about a law is that it is in operation whether you are aware of it or not. In other words, if you jump off a building, you are going to fall and hit the ground whether you know about the law of gravity or not. The law doesn't care if you know about the law or not. The law just operates. It is a blind force of nature. The same goes for mental laws. They are impersonal and simply describe the way our minds work. Anyone can observe and confirm this information. So when reading about the mental laws in this book, it is a good idea to remember that laws are invisible principles that describe how phenomena behave, and that laws operate automatically. You can't make them happen or not happen. Laws are impersonal. It doesn't matter who you are. Laws operate equally for all. And finally, laws are scientific. They can be observed and confirmed by anyone. So with this in mind, let's look at the mental laws. Law 1. The law of thoughts arising. Thoughts arise and disappear. Thoughts arise and disappear. This is the first law because it describes an impersonal universal phenomenon which is true for everyone. No one knows why or where thoughts come from or what a thought is, but everyone has thoughts. This is the nature of life on this plane. You can observe and confirm this for yourself. You can test this and see if this is true or not for you. Here's what to do. Look at a white wall. Sit down on a chair and face a white wall. If possible, a wall that is completely blank, with no pictures or anything, just a plain white wall. Preferably there Should be nothing specific on the wall for you to look at. Now sit down and look at the wall and decide not to think. Decide to make your mind blank. Try to do this for 2 minutes. Just sit there and look at the wall and do not think. Can you do it? Probably not. Why not? Well, because thoughts arise. That is what happens. Thoughts just arise. And you can't make this not happen. You can't make your mind go blank for very long because thoughts suddenly appear, and seemingly completely of their own accord. Obviously, it wasn't you who made the thoughts come, especially since you decided when you sat down on the chair that you were just going to sit there and look at the white wall and not think. But you couldn't, could you? Why? Because it's just not possible. It's not possible for anyone. And this is not because you were doing anything wrong. No, not at all. It's because the nature of life on this plane is that thoughts just appear all by themselves. This is the nature of mind. It has nothing to do with us. We are not making thoughts happen. Thoughts come and go on their own. That is why this is a law. It happens to everyone. It's an impersonal phenomenon, and it's something you can observe and confirm for yourself. And it is happening all the time to everyone in every waking hour of our lives. If you watch very carefully, you can even see it happening. If you sit quietly for a while, you can actually see how a thought just arises, and you can look at it for a moment. And then what happens? Well, then the thought disappears. Again, all by itself. You didn't do anything in particular, and still the thought just goes back to wherever it came from, wherever that was. And then what happens? Well, if you're still sitting quietly and looking at the blank wall, you will notice that another thought arises. Again, all by itself. And all you were doing was just sitting there in the chair, looking at the wall and trying not to think. So now you know. Thoughts do arise and disappear. This is the truth. You have observed it for yourself. You have tested this for yourself, and you can see that this is actually happening for you. You can see that thoughts do arise in your mind and that they do disappear again. And the interesting thing is that this is going on all the time, even when you're not sitting and staring at a blank wall, and you're not willing this to happen. In fact, you have nothing to do with it at all. The fact that thoughts arise and disappear again is a completely impersonal phenomenon. It just happens, and there's nothing you can do to stop it either. What about meditation? But what about meditation, you ask? Lots of people meditate, and many meditate because they want to calm the mind and stop thinking. But does this happen? Is it possible? Well, in my experience, you can't prevent thoughts from arising. Even people who have meditated for years can't not think. It is true, though, that when you sit and meditate, you do calm down and the thought stream does slow down. But what you also notice is that when you sit and meditate and observe, thoughts still arise and disappear. Maybe at a slower rate, but the thoughts still arise and disappear again. This is something you become very aware of when you meditate. And you can sit and watch them come and go. And of course, as you get more experienced at meditating, things do slow down, and yes, you may have less thoughts arising, and you may also identify less with them and not get so attached to them anymore. But still thoughts arise. You may not find yourself going off into stories and getting lost there for a while. But still thoughts do come and go. You may also experience so-called gaps or spaces in between the thoughts because they come more slowly, but thoughts are still happening. The reality is thoughts continue to arise and disappear again because this is the nature of mind. So if anyone tells you that meditation is about not thinking, don't believe them. Try meditating regularly yourself and see what happens. Law 2. The law of witnessing. There is a difference between you and your thoughts. There is a difference between you, the one who is having thoughts, and the thoughts themselves. This is another impersonal universal phenomenon and is also true for everyone. Once someone has pointed this out for you, you can observe this and confirm it for yourself. This is why it's a law. You don't need a PhD to see this. So yes, you can observe that there is a difference between you and your thoughts. And again, you can test this for yourself. So how do you do this? Back to the white wall. To test this law, go back to your chair facing the white wall. Now sit down again and look at the white wall and just breathe and see what happens. The same thing will happen that happened the last time you sat down on the chair and looked at the white wall. Thoughts will arise and disappear. But this time, I'd like you to notice something else. I'd like you to notice who or what is watching the thoughts arising and disappearing. Who or what is observing this phenomenon? Immediately when I ask you this question, you notice that you, whatever that is, are watching the thoughts arise and disappear. So obviously you cannot be the thoughts that are arising and disappearing, since you are watching them come and go. You, whatever that is, are there as the thoughts arise, and you, whatever that is, are there as the thought disappear again. So there must be a difference between you and the thought, since you, whatever that is, are still there once a thought has disappeared again. So you cannot be the thoughts that come and go. No, you are something else. You must be the one that is witnessing, watching, and observing. You must be the witness, the watcher, the observer. Watch closely what is going on as you sit there looking at the blank wall, and you will see that this too is true, that there is a difference between you, the observer of the thoughts, and the thoughts themselves. Notice you are still there. When you begin to see this, you will see that you, the witness, are always there, whether you are thinking this is a good day, this is a lousy day, I have a cold, I'm feeling wonderful, I'm depressed, I'm angry, I'm tired. It doesn't make any difference what thoughts and feelings arise, you are still there. You, the witness, the one in whom the thoughts are arising and disappearing in. You are still there. This is a very important, fundamental discovery, so please test this for yourself until you are completely convinced that you are not your thoughts. Observe and confirm this phenomenon until you can see the difference between the one who is observing you and the thoughts that come and go. The key to freedom. This discovery that there is a difference between you and your thoughts is so important because it is the key to freedom. This basic discovery will open the door to great insights, greater understanding, and in the end, total liberation from whatever is bothering you. So please remember this and think deeply about this law. Now, why do I say this? Well, for many reasons, but mainly because most people today are still totally identified with their thoughts. They think they're their thoughts, and thus they are run by their thoughts, often leading to untold suffering and disastrous consequences. But when you begin to wake up to the nature of reality and realize that there is a difference between you and your thoughts, it allows you to step back and examine your thoughts instead of being run by them. And not only does this give you a little space and a little more distance to the things that are happening in your life, this discovery can actually lead to the birth of wisdom. Or you could say this discovery is the birth of wisdom and the key to freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of your own thoughts and beliefs, and freedom from the tyranny of what you perceive to be other people's thoughts and beliefs. That is why this discovery is truly transformative. But again, don't believe me. Just keep on testing the concepts that I present in this book and find out for yourself whether or not they are true. Once you have ascertained for yourself that they are true, they will begin to work their magic in your life. Reality check. Content versus context. We can call the observer in which thoughts arise context because the observer is the field in which thoughts appear and disappear. Thoughts are simply the content of the field. Seeing the difference between context and content is enormously empowering because when you see that the real you is not the content, you don't have to be run by it anymore. Also, seeing the difference between the observer and thoughts means you can shift your focus from identifying with content, thoughts, to identifying with context, the field of awareness/consciousness in which thoughts are arising. This shift in focus immediately recontextualizes all events and experiences for you, and as a result, you are able to see things in the larger perspective. This is the key to understanding the compassion and lightheartedness you notice in wise people. So what are you? Once you make this important discovery that you are not your thoughts, but the observer of the thoughts that arise and disappear, the question naturally arises, who then are you? Or even better, what are you? This is the great existential question, isn't it? So what's the answer? If you keep looking back at what is observing, you will discover what all the great ones throughout human history have discovered, that this you that is watching and observing is consciousness itself. As I said before, this is the most basic and fundamental quality of existence. Consciousness, we find, is the ground and precondition for everything we experience in life. Without consciousness, there is no experience. If you are in doubt about this, ask yourself, are you conscious right now? And the answer is yes. Of course you are. Otherwise, how could you be reading this book? Consciousness is a prior, before, all human activity. It must be. So consciousness is a precondition to everything, to every experience. Consciousness is the background upon which everything unfolds and takes place. Consciousness is the field of awareness, the ultimate reality, the context in which all content, all thoughts, feelings, and sensations arises and disappears. Reality check. Who are you? You can identify with consciousness itself or with the content of consciousness, your thoughts. Identifying with consciousness itself is the direct route to the ultimate reality, the self. Law 3, the law of naming. Thoughts name the world. As we move along in our study of the way the mind works, we come to the next law, which describes how our minds interpret the world around us. Here's what happens. When we look at the world, we think we see a this and a that and a you and a me. But in reality, according to modern science, what we regard as the solid physical world is in fact one continuous, unbroken field of energy. According to quantum mechanics, these waves of energy become particles or localized space-time events that pop out of the field when there is an observer. Other traditions call this one field the absolute, the ultimate reality, Rigpa, the Tao, God, Brahman, and so forth. See box. The non-dual field is reality, and in this reality, everything is everything, and there is no this or that until naming. Until we name the field. Naming is the name of the game we play. Let's see what we do. When we are born, we have no language. And then our parents teach us. On the most basic level, we learn to simply name the world. That's how we all begin. Our mother and father teach us to say tree, house, car, girl, boy, man, woman, computer, refrigerator, ice cream, and so forth. This is what the world teaches us. This past year I have had the privilege of watching my son and his wife teach my little grandson Adam, who is 2.5, to name the world. It's fascinating to watch. And it makes me wonder, what was his experience of the world before his parents started teaching him to name things? And what was our experience before our parents taught us to name things? What did things look like then? Is this why my grandson bumped into things before he learned to name things? Was it because he didn't experience reality as separate things and people? But now he is learning to separate because his parents tell him, this is a house. This is a car. You are a boy. It's fascinating to watch. Right. Now he's been calling himself the boy. Fascinating, fascinating. Does that mean he is still regarding himself from the viewpoint of the greater consciousness, the observer, that we all are? I wonder. But obviously, this naming of the world is a vitally important and very useful tool that allows us to navigate our way through life. And for most of us, it's a completely automatic and innocent process. We do it all the time without thinking about what we are doing. And even after we've grown up, we continue to do this every day of our life, starting every morning. When we wake up, we name the world with our thoughts. Yes, our thoughts name the world. If you watch yourself closely, you can see yourself doing this when you wake up in the morning. If you don't understand what I mean, have you ever had the experience of waking up and not knowing who you were or where you were? And just for an instant feeling totally blank? And then you remembered, oh, I'm so-and-so-and. I'm here in bed, and that's my husband lying next to me, and I've got to get up and go to work, and the whole world comes flooding back in, or so you think. And so it does. Well, that's what I mean. If you look carefully just as you wake up, you will see how you do this every single morning. But to go back to the levels of naming, as I said, we learn to name the world, and the first level of naming is simple nouns: boy, house, car, chair, cat, bread, and so forth. But that's only the beginning. On the next level of naming, we put nouns together into sentences and thoughts become more descriptive. We say, the big house next door, her new car is blue. My computer is working again. The tree over there is so beautiful, and so forth. And again, this is all very well and innocent enough. We name the world and then start telling stories about it. And then we start to believe our stories. We believe our stories are reality and that this is the world. Reality check, quantum mechanics. Now we can see how we name the one field of reality that is before us. Quantum mechanics says this is what is actually happening. Science has now proven that observation by a conscious observer is responsible for the collapse of the wave function, Heisenberg principle. In other words, the waves of energy or potential become actual time-space events when they are observed. Phenomenon pops out of the field when we focus our attention on it. Stories and judgments. But there's more. On the next level, our stories become more complex and we begin to make judgments. We start telling stories about good and bad, right and wrong. We say it's not good that he spends so much time in front of the computer. She shouldn't drive so fast. It's reckless. The people in the house next door should cut down that tree because it's blocking the sun in my yard, and so forth. We start making value judgments. We say things should or shouldn't be a certain way. We say things are good or bad. And once we've named this or that, we start comparing this and that to each other. Everything gets more and more complicated, and we believe this is the world. But the question is this really the world? Is it? Or is it just our stories? What happened to the unbroken field of energy that is all of it? Where did it go? Well, actually, it didn't go anywhere. We just became so engrossed in and identified with our thoughts and stories that we lost sight of it and eventually forgot all about it. Non-dualism. Non-dualism refers to the nature of reality, the one field, the absolute or ultimate reality in which there are no distinctions or dichotomies. The nature of reality is one, and therefore all dualities are illusions. They are unreal and at best they are simply mental constructions we use for convenience. Most of the world's greatest spiritual traditions are non-dual. Here are some of the basic concepts or terms you will encounter. Advaita, from the Hindu tradition, literally means non-duality. Advaita refers to the identity of the self, Atman, and the whole, Brahman. Two of the great modern teachers in this tradition are the American psychiatrist David R. Hawkins and the Indian master Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. Brahman from Hinduism refers to the unchanging, infinite, immanent, and transcendent reality. Rigpa from the Tibetan Dzogchen tradition means our ultimate nature, the ground luminosity, the state of omniscience or enlightenment. God from the Christian tradition is also the absolute and infinite reality. God is the one divine principle governing all existence. Zen, a non-dual tradition from the East that seeks to realize the absolute in all activities by means of experience. Awakening is to be achieved through meditation and the direct, experiential realization of the nature of reality. Tao, a Chinese tradition. In the Tao Te Ching, the Tao or path is described as follows. The way that can be described is not the true way. The name that can be named is not the constant name. The Tao is believed to be transcendent and without form and cannot be named or categorized. In other words, the Tao, the nature of reality, is basically indefinable. It has to be experienced. Buddhism. There are many paths and types of Buddhism. The Buddha himself, Siddhartha Gautama, commonly known as the Buddha or the Awakened One, is said to have experienced the ultimate reality and then spent the rest of his life trying to translate and teach what he experienced to others. And now that we have looked at how we name the world and tell stories about it, let's look at what happens when we believe in the stories we are telling about the one field of reality that we are living in. What happens when we believe what we think? Law 4. The law of cause and effect. Thought is cause, experience is effect. Our thinking, the thoughts that we entertain, determine our experience of life. This is the great law of life on this plane. In brief, this means that our experience of reality, or this thing called life, is the result of our thoughts about life or reality, and not the result of experiencing reality itself directly. And again, this is an impersonal, universal law. It has nothing to do with who you are or what you do. It doesn't matter how young or old you are or if you are rich or poor. This law applies to everyone, without exception, which is why it is a law. This law means, whatever you think, you get to experience. Whatever I think, I get to experience. When you think something is great, you get to experience that. When you think something is terrible, you get to experience that. Nothing else is going on. Reality is what it is. It's our interpretation we get to live. But again, don't believe me. Read on. And then test this for yourself. We experience what we believe in, especially what we believe in with conviction. Your first reaction to the above might be, oh, but this is not true. Everyone can see that such and such is a terrible thing. It has nothing to do with my thinking. But you have to look more closely and ask yourself if this is really true. Because you will discover when you look closely that everything under the sun is interpreted in a multitude of different ways by a multitude of different people. The exact same event is experienced in very different ways by different people. And this applies to our health, finances, relationships, you name it. What is excellent health for one person is a poor condition for the next. A lot of money to one person is almost not enough for the next. A big issue in one person's relationship doesn't matter at all to another. What seems politically correct to one person is completely wrong to another. And it's the same at the workplace. One person experiences working on a certain project with a tight deadline as highly stressful, while another thinks it's just an exciting challenge. One person hates working late and just wants to get home to the family, while another person loves working late because she doesn't especially want to go home to the family. So our experience is always entirely subjective, always and always based on who we are and what we believe is good or bad for us. There is no neutral objective definition of a good or bad event. It all depends on the point of view and the belief systems of the person, people involved. And our points of view depend on a multitude of things, including how we were programmed, our culture, our religion, our background, our sex, our age, and so on. And even this changes for each individual as they mature and evolve. Because most people discover over time that what they once perceived and experienced as a bad event can turn out to be a good event when seen from another perspective. Hence the saying, a blessing in disguise. So please consider this carefully and honestly. If you do, I can assure you that you will discover that all our reactions, yours and mine and everyone else's, in any and every situation are based on the thoughts and beliefs we have about life and our beliefs as to the meaning of these situations and events. And so we find that in all situations, the basic mechanism is thought is cause, and experience is effect. This is what is going on at all times for everyone. So take a look again, and you will see that when something happens, if we think it's good, we feel good about it, and we experience it as good. And when something happens and we think it's bad, we then feel bad about it, and experience it as bad. And this has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the event itself. The event is just the event, and we discover that in truth. There is no connection whatsoever between an event and our reactions to it. The way we experience events is completely determined by our thoughts about the events, thought experience. So we discover that everything we experience is the effect of our thinking. And this is the law of cause and effect in action. Unfortunately, most people are unaware of this process because they don't know the law of cause and effect. And as a result, they don't see it happening. They don't see that an event takes place, something happens, and then they immediately click into their interpretations of the event. It happens so fast that most people don't notice the process. Instead, they just think, oh, this is bad, and put the so-called blame on the outside event. They don't see the middle step, the way in which our thinking, our interpretation of the event triggers our reaction and our experience. But the fact is, reality is what it is, and the rest is just thoughts in our minds. And our thoughts are not the direct experience itself, but only our interpretation of events. So it's our interpretation we get to live. We tell ourselves stories about events, people, and things and what they mean, and then we get to live it. This is our only experience. If this is the first time you've met this concept, you will probably find it extremely challenging. And it is, because it's such a radical shift in perspective from everything we've learned and were taught to believe about life. But this doesn't make it any less true. So please observe and confirm this mechanism for yourself and find out if it's true. Because if it is, the consequences are truly amazing and liberating. Reality check. So what happens if we drop our thoughts about the meaning of what's going on? First of all, is this possible? Can we drop our thoughts about what's going on? And if we can, even for just a few moments, what then do we experience? Well, let's give it a try. Here's what to do. After you read this, put this book down and take a look at what is going on right now, right where you are, with no thoughts about the meaning of what's going on. Can you do this for just a minute or two? And when you do this, what do you experience? When I try, the first thing I always notice when I let go of my thoughts about the meaning of what's going on is that it suddenly gets very peaceful and quiet. The second thing I notice is that there is only me here and now. And that's about it. There is this moment with whatever is going on, and I'm just in it, or I am just it. For example, this moment right now, just me sitting in front of my computer. Or it could be this moment walking down the street with the sun on my face. Or this moment, drinking a cup of tea, or brushing my teeth, or doing the dishes, or talking to a friend. That's about it. Life is right before me. Plain and simple. And it's very peaceful. Interesting, isn't it? To experience the present moment without any interpretations or thoughts about the meaning of what is going on is a very interesting experience. If you can find this space, try to rest there for a moment or two without judging or forming any opinions about this moment. If you can do this for just a moment, I am quite sure the law of cause and effect will make perfect sense to you because you will see that without interpretations, there is just this moment. Without thinking about the past or the future, there is absolutely nothing to compare this moment to. There is only this moment, this exactly as it is happening now. Usually we don't see this because we're so busy living our interpretation of what's going on. We are comparing this to that. We think this is good or that is bad, and then we get to experience this is good or that is bad, instead of the pristine simplicity of this moment. And well, this is the story of our lives, your life, and of my life too. Your experience is your interpretation of what's going on. My experience is my interpretation of what's going on. This is a pretty wild discovery, isn't it? Why? Because when we understand the law of cause and effect, it means we have nothing to deal with but our own thoughts. Reality never gives us any problems. It's our thinking that does. And even though I have been saying this for years in all my books, the ramifications of this discovery are just mind-boggling and continue to be mind-boggling. So now you know. If you want to know the truth, there is only one place to look, and that's inside yourself. Because the law of cause and effect tells us that all our experiences are internal events. And that's life. So the big question is, who decides what your experience of life is going to be like? Good question, right? This leads us to the next big discovery, that it is our identification with our thoughts that makes us suffer. Another mind-boggling discovery indeed. Because what in fact makes us suffer? What can possibly make us suffer? Only our interpretation of an event can make us suffer. Only our thoughts can make us suffer. Nothing else is going on. Reality check. Arguing with reality is the only suffering. Reality is neither good nor bad. Reality just is. But all thoughts and actions have consequences. This is the law of cause and effect. Law 5, the law of emotion. You can't have an emotion without having a thought first. This important law says, thought precedes emotion. Thought is always the cause of emotion. In other words, you can't have an emotion without having a thought first. This comes as a surprise to many people because once they have heard about the law of cause and effect, that thought is the cause and experience is effect, they often ask, but what about emotions? And they will say things like, I wasn't thinking anything in particular. I just felt sad or angry, upset, irritated, depressed, afraid, etc. And the answer is that yes, perhaps it seems as if these emotions just appeared, but the truth is a thought or a group of thoughts and beliefs always precede every emotion, whatever the emotion is. Because the impersonal and automatic mechanism is you can't have an emotion without having a thought first. Thought comes first. Thought always precedes emotion. Please consider this carefully and test it for yourself. When you do, you will discover that you cannot be angry without having an angry thought first. It is impossible. Even if you think you are not thinking a specific, angry thought at the very moment you are feeling angry, you will find if you look closely that you have thoughts and beliefs about the situation, event, or person which make you feel angry. If you did not have the thought or belief that there is something about the situation or person that is wrong, inappropriate, or incorrect in some way, you could simply not feel angry. It would be impossible. The same is true about feeling sad. You cannot be sad without having a sad thought first. It's just not possible, even if you can't consciously put your finger on the so-called specific sad thought. There must be something about the event, situation, or person that corresponds to your beliefs about what is sad. The same holds true for feeling loving and kind. You can't feel loving and kind about anything or anyone without having loving and kind thoughts and attitudes first. Again, even if the specific, loving and kind thought is not apparent, your basic belief system makes you react in this way. For most people, this realization is a true revelation, especially because so many people seem to be driven by their emotions. To recognize and understand how our thinking triggers our emotions, both in ourselves and in other people, is a major shift in consciousness and a sign that we are waking up to reality. It also means that we are starting to understand the way the mind works and influences our lives. Understanding that thought precedes emotion also helps us understand the ways in which we are responsible for our own experiences, even though for most of us, the mechanism has been operating automatically and we were not conscious of what was going on. But now we are waking up and we are beginning to see how this law is operating in our lives. With this new understanding, we can see that we are not victims of outside forces which are beyond our control, but rather that we experience and perhaps suffer from our own unconscious beliefs and programming. This gives us the option of examining our thoughts and choosing to react more wisely in the future.